Hello, everyone, and coming live from St. Charles. I'm using my sewing machine to hold up my cell phone to record this because we're just getting more and more crafty. All right, we're at the end, you guys. This is the last chapter. I hope you are all doing well. I know that some of you are having more difficult times than others. I totally get it. We're gonna just do our best here. Let's adjust that a little bit. All right. So we've made it to the last chapter, chapter 11 on the 21st century mind. We're going to be talking about technology, how it interacts with the brain. Just a few things to touch base with before we go over the lecture, though, is one, we've got our last quiz this week. It's due on Friday. Half of the quiz will be over this last chapter. So 4 questions over 21st century mind, 4 or 5 questions. And then just like a question per chapter on our other chapters. So like wild card questions. They won't be too difficult, so don't think that you have to go back through all of your notes from all of the chapters. But just so that you kind of have in mind your other chapters as we near the final exam, which that's going to be a thing. Our final exam is indeed coming up. The final exam, I'm going to bring up my syllabus right now. I've got my computer in front of me. Like our other exam that we had online, you are going to get 3 days to take the final exam. So hopefully that gives you some leeway to decide at what time to take it. The final exam is worth a few more points than your other 2 exams. So it is worth 40 points. So it is buffed up a little bit, and that is because, it does have more questions on it, but I'll give you guys some information on May 4th, our last class, about what all to expect on it. For right now, though, things that you will need to study for this exam include chapter 9, 10, and 11. And I'm looking at the syllabus now, and I may throw in some kind of big picture questions from our other chapters. So it will primarily focus, like 30 of the 40 points will just be on those 3 chapters since the last exam, but 10 of the 40 points are going to be kind of those really big picture things from our previous chapters. So, not kind of gotcha questions where you'd have to pick out fine details, but things that hopefully you remember from this semester without having to really dig back in your brain and feel like you got tricked. These are things that I hope you carry with you for the rest of the semester. So hopefully that does not feel too intimidating. The goal is to make sure that you just remember the really important facets of this class, because at the end of the day, we as instructors know that you usually are only going to take about 5 pieces of information from any class, and we accept this. So I just want to make sure that you know the really big things. So those are some things to expect for that final exam. I'll put review material up next week, and the exam will take place from May 8th through 10th. So you have the 8th, 9th, or 10th to take it. You get 165 minutes, and it's due May 10th by 9 p.m. Another thing that is due relatively soon is the final paper on May 4th. Once again, if you are struggling, if you need an extension, please just let me know. So, those are all the things that are due. Aside from your discussion question, if you haven't done that yet. So let's get to these last things. So our chapter 11 is going to cover, the human brain as an organ of civilization, the invention of writing and logical thought. So writing and reading, you guys are doing that constantly, especially with the internet, with your phones. And then technology and the internet, which is where a lot of our discussion questions, in fact, pretty much all of our discussion questions are going to come from. So on slide 3, we just touch base back with that mental ensemble. The thing is, technology incorporates all of these. And we've talked about the mental ensemble, how it's unique to humans. And it's unique to all of these different chapters that we've looked at. And each chapter, whether it's looking at complex emotions or empathy or our ability to have morality or spirituality, all of them, end up needing the components of the mental ensemble. When we look at chapter 4, we've got the idea that the brain changes in modern times. So there's evidence that suggests that the brain networks that allow for the mental ensemble were in place tens of thousands of years ago. So your brain has been set up and ready to go for a very long time, as were your ancestors' brains. But there were major differences during the Upper Paleolithic time period for the minds of the Cro-Magnon people versus our modern minds. That's where we start to see the evolutionary break. But when we think about how the modern mind has these hundreds, thousands of centuries of cultural innovations shaping and molding it into its current form, we start to see some interesting things. And if we could travel back in time and meet these people where we share the same biology, we would still see them as being very other from us. I mean, that's why we love time travel shows or historical dramas, because it seems so different, even though they're very similar to us in so many ways. And it's because, they still have such different language and social customs. They have different traditions and beliefs. I mean, just outwardly, we see completely different clothing and food that they're eating, different methods of building their homes and decorating their homes and interacting with one another. And we think of how that separates them from us. And so on slide 5, we start to think about how our modern culture affects our modern mind, even though our modern brain itself is the same as those people from the past. And so we've got a picture of Alexander Luria. And we think about how the modern mind has been significantly altered, especially when we think about its function, especially as a result of our current culture. So Luria mentioned that the human cerebral cortex is an organ of civilization, and that the cerebral cortex can undergo this unlimited development by organizing new functional systems as a result of social learning experiences that we have during childhood, and that these already existing networks within our brains can be kind of recombined by culture, depending on how you're raised. So you can almost think of it as like your brain is this blank, ready to go computer, and you get to decide the operating system based on your culture. It's almost like you've got this computer and you're like, all right, well, am I going to put, Windows on it? Am I going to put Linux on it? Am I going to split the hard drive and do both and accidentally fragment my hard drive? And now every time I pick up my Dell computer, it spasms and breaks. But it's up to you, depending on your cultural background and the society in which you're raised. And no, that doesn't come from experience. That's not why I'm only using a Chromebook for everything and not my Dell laptop that doesn't work. Anyway, though, Alexander Luria really kind of talked about how these brains of ours are endlessly adaptive. And, you know, the functional systems are built out of things that already exist. And this comes from neuroplasticity to support his theories. And our last chapter of the book examines, you know, the different adaptations of the modern mental ensemble to the different technology we've encountered, especially in the past 100 years, but particularly for most of you guys within your lifetimes. You guys have really been alive only during this time, and so you're a case study in what this is like growing up in it, which is really amazing. So I'm going to end the video on this discussion question, which I didn't post on the discussion board, but I should have, and you're free to answer it. Or just think about it, or ask your parents or grandparents or other people if you happen to be living with them right now. And the question is, how might the modern mind adapt to technological advancements from the past century? If you happen to be living in a multi-generational household right now due to current circumstances, pass some of these questions. You know, you can make it a little easier for people who are not into psychology to understand the question, but ask how your elders have adapted to changes in technology and see what they say. Anyway, I will see you all later. Have a good day. Bye. Also, using this to hold up my phone, game changer.